Leader of the House of Lords, Lord Tebbit, Conservative Party Chairman, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, Islamic scholar who advised President Bush following 9/11, Simon Thomas, Plaid Cymru MP, and the comedian and writer Rhona Cameron. Well, welcome to Question Time from Alexandra Palace in London, the original home of BBC television. And a panel here who, as ever, don't know what the audience are going to ask them. Good evening. If you want to comment on what this panel says or what the audience says, you can, as ever, text us. 83981 is the number to text us on. And if you go to 155 CFAX, you'll be able to see what other people are saying. And if you're watching digitally, push the red button, you can do much the same. Let's have our first question, which comes from Claire Cober, please.
Was a Birmingham school right to suspend a member of teaching staff when it emerged that he was a member of the British National Party who would be standing in the European elections?
Valerie Amos.
Well, I have to say that this is one area that I do agree with the Birmingham School on. I think that the kind of views which are promoted by the British National Party, where they are clearly saying that there are members of our communities that are not welcome in this country, these are not the kind of views that should be promoted. Now, I'm someone that, on the whole, wants to see free speech. I want to see people who are able to interact and talk about issues in our society. But at the same time, I feel very concerned, particularly now, when we are seeing increasingly attacks against members of Islamic communities in our country. We're seeing increasing anti-Semitism. We're hearing talk that this is all political correctness when we try to deal with these issues. I think we have to take a very, very firm stand.
Would you kick out all teachers who belong to the BNP as well as people who are standing, even though it's a legal political party in this country?
No, I wouldn't. It's not a matter of kicking out all teachers. I think that what is important is that there are clear rules about making sure that individuals are able to say whether or not they're going to stand for a political party.
But it's the standing for the political party that's wrong, not holding the views.
These are rules that apply across our political system. In my view, it's holding the views. I don't like people who hold those views.
But I mean, you don't like people who hold conservative views, but you wouldn't ban them from standing for Parliament.
Can I finish my point?
Not yet.
It's a personal thing in the sense that I don't like people who hold those views. But I think that if people are going to stand for political parties, then it's important that that is recognised and that they tell the authorities about that.
Well, that's what they did. But Lord Tebbit, what do you think?
Well, I detest the BNP. I detest all socialist parties, but I detest the BNP more than any other socialist party, and it is a socialist party, by the way. But I think we would be very foolish if we start picking and choosing about which legal parties a man may belong to, stand for Parliament or the European Parliament, and still keep his job. I think that becomes offensive. And secondly, I think that it acts as a recruiting sergeant for the BNP. They've now got a cause, they've got a victim, they've got people who say that's not fair and who will gather round. I think far better to have let the man stand and made sure that he was thoroughly, completely and utterly humiliated in the vote.
That wouldn't help the children in the school, though.
No, but can I...
Sorry, no, go on.
That wouldn't help the children in the school. I mean, I would not want my children to be taught by such a teacher. I think children should be valued in schools, treated equally, and feel safe in school. And I don't think...
So, David, the issue for you is membership of the BNP.
My issue for me is membership
kick out
of the
any BNP member.
I would be prepared to do that. I think we should have... There's a school contract now. Parents must sign up for their children to go to school. Children themselves sign contracts with teachers about no bullying, no racism in the playground and so forth. This is public money educating for the future. We should not be using public money to peddle hate crimes and hate thought in our schools. It's as simple as that. The man should not be employed as a teacher. He has every right to stand as a member of the European Parliament. Of course he does.
You're talking a lot, but just answer this question. He's a maths teacher.
Yes.
Why do you say he's peddling hatred in the school? How do you know?
Because he does not believe that children should be treated equally.
Peddle. How do you know he's peddling hatred?
I don't know that the BNP peddles hate. The BNP relies on figuring. The BNP is not the party that should be supported in our schools. It's as simple as that. It's black and white in that case.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting you brought up math, because I was going to say I'd probably let him teach math. And probably algebra would be a good subject because it's about balancing equations and making all sides equal. But I wouldn't want him to be teaching history. And certainly not the period known as World War II. And I certainly wouldn't want him to be teaching literature.
Would you let
and those things that
teach
humanize
history?
A communist to teach history?
Should a communist teach history?
I don't think there's history in communism.
But the Communist Party is the most racist party in the world. The communists in Russia were responsible for more deaths than any other group in the world.
But you might not have heard the Cold War's over. And now Russia's good friends with us.
Okay, hold on. Let the man in the second row there, please, and then Rhona come.
Well, I think one of the major problems is that he's got those views in the first place, but isn't the point that it would actually impede him, his actual teaching, because he holds the views that some children should be taught more, have the right to be in his class, so how he would interact with the children himself, so obviously it's actually going to impede him as a teacher.
So again, it's membership, not standing as a candidate in the European Parliament that worries you.
If he acts badly in the classroom, sack him.
You keep letting Norman come back.
Okay, hold on.
Well, you know, Norman, your point about, would you let a communist teach? I mean, I wouldn't be happy with a person who supported the Conservative government who introduced Clause 28 to teach perhaps homophobia in schools.
Well, that's not true.
Well, no, we're just, But I actually think it's a very tricky matter because it is meant to be a democracy, and this guy does belong to a party, a proper party. But as Simon said, we could all do without the British National Party, and I think there should be more humility and compassion in schools, because the way everything's going, we need to rid society of prejudice, and I do not think a member of this party should be allowed anywhere near school, frankly.
Okay. You, sir.
Yes, I feel that the emphasis should be on being a good teacher, regardless of their political allegiances, and they shouldn't actually reveal those to their pupils. I mean, when I went to school, I often used to think, well, was he a teacher that supported the Labour Party or read The Guardian and things like that? But a good teacher will be down the middle and teach the subject.
So no teacher can stand for Parliament or for election, because they'd have to reveal their party then.
Oh, they can certainly reveal it then, yes, but in the classroom they have to do teach just exactly as what's
Man in the second row from the back.
It might be argued that he's not said anything yet, but during the next 5 weeks he will be saying a lot, and he'll be peddling a lot of racist views. If I was a teacher in that situation and I was being placed in front of a classroom with black children in it, I would not find that would be a situation where I could hold a professional conduct. In election campaigns, people do start peddling unacceptable views. Only this week we saw the UK Independence Party candidate for the Mayor of London say he wouldn't go and canvass in areas where there were too many gays. This kind of nonsense must be stamped out.
Okay, and you, sir. That's you.
Is it that the fascists or the BNP are not Democrats is the real reason why this guy should not be teaching young people? They're not Democrats. They use democracy in order to hide behind and to carry out attacks on black, minority, ethnic people. That's what they do. They use democracy, they use Parliament. To me, they should even be standing for Parliament.
Yeah. Valerie Amos, you wanted to come back on something Norman Tebbit said.
Well, really, it's on the point that if you are standing as a candidate, you are revealing your political views. And the political views being held by the BNP and the ways in which they express those views go against some of the laws we have with respect to race discrimination in this country. I agree. Then absolutely prosecute them. But I also think that there is an issue about the extent to which we allow these views to be reflected by teachers in our schools. And once somebody has said that they are standing as a candidate for a party who believes these things, then that becomes a real problem, I think, in our classrooms.
Okay, so, you know, the man in the blue shirt there, you. Yes,
yeah, I'd like to point out that the actual reason he was chucked out from his job as being a teacher was not because he was standing for the British National Party, but because on his website he published anti-Semitic and Holocaust-denying material, even beyond what the British National Party would normally stand for. And so whether you believe that it's okay for a British National Party candidate to be a teacher or not, I don't think that anybody could actually agree that it's okay for somebody who was as openly racist as he was on his website to be a teacher in any school.
Okay.
Well, that's fine.
The man in the second row, you say, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to echo this gentleman here's point. I think it is important not to go too far. I mean, you could ban homosexual teachers that objectively take an extreme view in politics. But on the other hand, these days it's more and more important to vet those that are in contact with children. And I wouldn't want anything to undermine that.
What about what Lord Tebbit said about communist teachers being just as dangerous? Will you ban them?
No, I mean, same point. I mean, you have to rely on the integrity of teachers to sort of swallow their views, their prejudices, and be objective in the classroom.
Okay, the gentleman very back there in spectacles, and I come to you in front.
I agree with Sir Norman in a lot of ways. It's a difficult subject. You're opening up a can of worms now for the BNP. At the end of the day, he's a teacher on one hand. He hasn't done anything wrong in his curriculum. There is a curriculum that's set by the Education Board that everyone has to follow. Fine, yes, everyone knows he's a racist. BNP is a legal party. And now you've just given him a forum for him to get louder and louder and louder. I think they should just kept an eye on him. And if it had got worse, then pull in then. But really, you're then opening up a real big can of worms.
A bit difficult with the stuff on the internet, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like keep an eye on it.
The stuff
For someone who has put anti-Semitic literature on their website and has publicly...
I totally agree with you. I don't doubt that. But I think the point that Sir Norman was making was the fact that it's a legal party. I totally disagree with it, obviously.
It's a legal party, yes, but we have to ask ourselves, do we want teachers in our schools? This is the point for me. Do we want teachers in our schools that believe that the children they're teaching are not equal?
And they're paid with public funding.
And paid from public funds. I just don't accept that.
But you're assuming that's what he's taught.
David,
I'm assuming that's what he believes.
It would be hard to be dispassionate.
There's a lot of things that people believe. When they teach it, a fireman could believe in the British National Party. It doesn't mean he's going to stop putting out fires.
But surely...
But he's not teaching our children, and he's not treating people unequally.
Okay. But surely the issue is about whether or not, in the things that this guy is saying on his website, he is breaking our laws in terms of the protection that we give to minorities in this country through our race legislation.
But hang on, if he's breaking the law, as Norman Tebbit said, he can be prosecuted.
Yeah, and
nobody's prosecuted.
I absolutely think he should be prosecuted.
You think he should be prosecuted?
If he's breaking the law, he should be prosecuted.
I'm with Valerie there, but the question you have to ask yourselves is, do you think it's right that someone should be able to object to an atheist teaching their children who are Christians? Do you think it would be wrong to have a Muslim teacher in a school where most of the pupils are children?
I think it would be right to have an
It's a very slippery slope.
This is a Roman Catholic
above
school.
all, what we've done tonight is to give huge publicity to this man who is not terribly important and who, as I say, should be humiliated at the polls.
Okay, the man in there, and then we'll move on.
I have a comment to make about, I think he shouldn't be suspended. And speaking from personal experience, I'm a maths teacher, I'm Indian, I'm Muslim, and I was called Paki last week by one of the students. But still, I think it is kind of, we are intolerant in a way of that point of view as well. We have to accommodate all views.
Did you ask him if he could do a quadratic equation or not? That would have asserted your superiority.
Okay, let's move on to another question. Olivia Shaw, please.
Does the panel think that ex-diplomats should retire gracefully rather than try to influence current political thought?
These are the 52 diplomats, many of them former ambassadors from the Middle East, who said that British and American policy in the Middle East was doomed on both Iraq and Israel. Simon Thomas, do you think ex-diplomats should go and cultivate their roses? and play no further part in politics?
That's what's amazing about this. They usually do. That's precisely what they do. They go to their gardens and they grow the arboretums or whatever. But these are 52 diplomats of immense experience. Some of them, like Sir Crispin Tickell, are first-rate diplomats within the diplomatic service, now questioning openly what the government has been doing in Iraq and within the Middle East, and particularly the so-called peace process between the Israelis and the Palestinians now. I'm really grateful they did that. I think they've done a service, paid back many years of service themselves in revealing the depth of feeling within the Foreign Office and the diplomatic service. And I hope it's a wake-up call to Tony Blair and to Jack Straw and to Valerie and everyone else on this panel that we need to crack on with a peace process within Israel and Palestine and our work in Iraq. And I think they have done the right thing by coming out and being undiplomatic for once. So let's praise our diplomats for being undiplomatic.
Yes, yeah.
Valerie Amos.
Well, I agree with Simon in that we do have to sort out the peace process. There's no doubt about that. And the kind of things that we have seen in the Middle East are absolutely intolerable on both sides, I have to say. On the specifics of the question, I mean, should diplomats retire gracefully? My own view is that if people have a view to express, it's important that they express it. And I think that having 52 former diplomats actually write an open letter to the Prime Minister just demonstrates the strength of feeling that they have, but also raises the point that there are lots of other ex-diplomats, indeed current diplomats in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office who agree with our current policy.
Are they going to publish a letter?
I don't know if they do agree. I think a lot of them don't want to lose their jobs. I mean, that's part of the problem. I mean, I would say that it's unprecedented, as far as I know, in British history. I mean, something like this, where 52 diplomats, I mean, to me, it just emphasizes how grave the situation is. And I think that they're really frightened. I mean, and I think they're courageous in doing so. And I also think that they should be listened to, because this is several hundred years of collective experience. Yeah. I mean, this is not something simply to ignore.
I agree with you, it's not something to ignore, because I think it's really important that the kind of debate that we're having with the Middle East is about the Middle East is one that we should have.
But I'll give you an example. I was with, and I won't mention what country, but I was with an American ambassador who in private said that he was just disgusted with the policies from Washington, and he was in one of the Gulf states. And if that's his personal feeling, he's not expressing it for whatever reasons. So I think that you will find amongst many of these diplomats in the Corps, I think they're just overwhelmed because they hear the other side, don't forget. I mean, they get earfuls that people here don't hear. And I think, I mean, it's just, we're looking at such an incredibly perilous situation right now.
Valerie Amos, are you discomforted by having 52 experienced diplomats who've served in all these places, criticizing government policy in quite such ferocious terms?
No, I'm not, I have to say, because, as I say, it's an extraordinarily difficult situation, and it's a situation that's gone on over many, many years. The fact is that US government policy, UK government policy has not changed over many years. US government policy on the Middle East has changed in the sense that we now have a president who agrees, finally, that a two-state solution in the Middle East is what we should be looking for, and that's been confirmed again recently. So I'm not discomforted by it. I think it's really important that people have an opportunity to put their view. But can I just pick up one point?
No, you've spoken quite a lot. I'm going to bring in some members of the audience. And I'll come back to you.
I mean, I just think this whole letter from the diplomats just goes to show, to illustrate again how arrogant our government is. You know, they don't seem to listen to the people, or, you know, to people in the media, people who speak out. And now they're not even listening to the people who actually know a hell of a lot more about what's going on in places like Iraq and Israel. They just ignore them again.
Okay, Rhona Cameron.
Yeah, I agree. I agree entirely. I think it's a wake-up call to Tony Blair. I think he's completely lost his grip. And I think that I welcome this behaviour. It's not extreme enough. It's the start. It's the tip of the iceberg. There should be more, and there is going to be more. It must be very difficult to be a member of the Labour Party. You see, I'm not a politician, obviously, and nor am I a political expert, and I wasn't a student, so I don't come from that kind of, you know, student lefty background kind of thing in comedy or anything. But, you know, it's very, very confusing to be a person who voted in Labour, who thought that it was going to be a wonderful day. You know, they're playing the Things Can Only Get Better. That was the song used at the time. And I remember I was in New Zealand at the time, and I wore my rose, you know, and it was oh, it's all over, all the misery. And it's so horrible. You know, it is so horrible. And I will not be voting Labour in the next election because I want Tony Blair out. Because this war, hang on, David, just one second. I think that basically, just in a nutshell, I think that the move from the diplomats reflects extreme times, and I welcome this move, and there should be more.
Okay. The man, single you out as bald-headed, but the man with the bald head.
Don't worry, they all say that. Well, I just think it's time to stop criticising the war in Iraq. I mean, it's done and dusted. We are in Iraq now, and we're in it for the long term, and to actually start trying to find a way to stabilise it, for politically and socially, just for the people of Iraq.
Done and dusted.
Yeah.
Really, done and dusted. You think it's done and dusted? You think we finished in Iraq?
Well, we just can't pull out of Iraq.
I don't think we're going to use the word stabilise again.
I mean, it's important to note that this letter actually said one thing of great importance, I think, that diplomats have never said before. They directly criticised the Prime Minister for supporting George Bush's current procedures in Iraq, directly supported criticised the Prime Minister for not stepping aside for the military tactics now being used in places like Fallujah.
All right.
We are creating more problems, not less. These diplomats should be marching with the 2 million that marched before.
All right, now hang on. Lord Tebbit. All right, Lord Tebbit. Baroness Amos. I will bring you.
I just want to pick up on this one point.
He hasn't spoken yet. He hasn't spoken.
But it's a direct response.
No, I'll bring you in.
Point.
No, you must do what I ask you to do.
All right.
Lord Tebbit.
If you insist, David.
I insist.
Let's go back to the question whether the diplomats, former diplomats, were justified. Yes, if they feel so, sure. As Valerie says, they have the right of free speech, just perhaps even as members of the BNP do, actually. So they have the right as well. Should they have done it? If they felt like it, yeah, sure. Are their views correct? Well, that's perhaps more debatable. I suspect you could find a lot of ex-diplomats from the Foreign Office who would take a different view. The Foreign Office has always been very much divided between those who were pro-Arabist and those who were pro-Jewish, pro-Israeli. And there's always been a conflict there between those two groups. And it's a conflict which has often got Britain into problems in the Middle East because we've tried to be on both sides at once. And we've tried to ride two horses going in different directions, and that's pretty tricky. I have my reservations about the way in which the Iraqi war has been conducted, or more particularly, the way in which the post-war aspect has been conducted. The military operation to take Iraq was very well done, but I don't think that the consequences had been properly thought through. But I think also those diplomats were saying very much that they were unhappy about some of the developments in the Palestine-Israel context.
One-sided and illegal, they said, British and American policy was.
Yeah, I don't think either of those things is actually true, and I agree with Valerie that we've now brought an American president to support the two nations, two states solution. That is, that we now recognize the rights of Palestine and the Palestinians as well as the rights of the Israelis. Well, I think that's a step forward.
He also called Ariel Sharon a man of peace.
Well, I wouldn't have gone that far.
All right, we've got a lot of people wanting to speak, and Valerie Amos, I will not forget to bring you back in,
That's
having
very
not
kind
allowed
of
to
you,
come. That's
David.
all right. The woman at the very back there in black, please.
I would like to point out that although we have President Bush supporting the two-nation policy, both Britain and the US are currently selling arms and weapons to the Israelis. Should they really be in charge of a peace process when they currently benefit from the war?
Okay. The man up there in the very back row. Yeah, the man in the back row there, yes.
just want to take up a point made by Baroness Amos about having a debate on the issue of the Middle East. I think that's great, but what's a shame is that Tony Blair just isn't listening and nothing's changed there. I want to know also from the panel, do they think that as a result of UK-US-led policy in the Middle East, there's going to be greater risk of terror attacks around the world? And in particular, is it more likely that there'll be a terror attack in the UK?
Okay, well, let's just deal with the Blair point, Valerie Amos.
I don't agree with that point that we're not listening. We worked really hard with our partners to get to the roadmap and to get the acceptance around the world of the two-state solution. And, you know, a recognition finally from the United States, from our European Union partners, ourselves, and everyone else, that we needed to see Israel and Palestine side by side, both stable countries. Now, how we get to that is what is at dispute. And we all knew it wasn't going to be an easy process, because we still, on the one hand, have terrorism from the Palestinian side. We're seeing activities from the Israeli side that we have condemned in the strongest possible terms. For example, when they recently killed Sheikh Yassim, I mean, that was totally unacceptable.
President
But
Bush didn't condemn it.
We, the British government, condemned it in the strongest possible terms, publicly. And it's really important that we do that. That where we see activities that we cannot condone, that we make that clear. I think we have listened, and that's why we've got as far as we've got. But let's all remember that these processes take a huge amount of effort and time.
Okay, the woman in the second row there.
I'd just like to say that I think the letter is obscenely unbalanced and obscenely one-sided. There's no mention of Palestinian suicide bombers, no acknowledgement that Palestinian terrorists are a fundamental obstacle to peace in the Middle East. And just, sorry to Baroness Amos, I don't see why we should condemn the killing of people who are sanctioning the murder of innocent people across Israel. My family who live in Israel, who live in terror every day, I think we should hunt down all the leaders of Hamas until we can guarantee that there might be security in Israel.
Well, I'd like to say that unfortunately the day I arrived in the UK from the United States, one of the headlines was Hamza supports suicide bombing in Great Britain. And I'd like to take the opportunity to point out that that is actually Abu Hamza. And I know there was a picture of him, and unfortunately some people think all Muslims look alike. So I just want to point out he has gray hair, and I don't. So I'm not that Abu Hamza. But I find it very interesting that Baroness Amos said terrorism on the side of the Palestinians and activities on the side of Israel. And I think that's one of the major problems. Until state terrorism is recognized and condemned, and two wrongs don't make a right. I don't believe that, but I think it's very important that we identify state terrorism when Palestinians' houses are being bulldozed, when people like Tom Hurdell, a very brave British man at the age of 22, is protecting Palestinian children and ends up getting shot in the head by an Israeli sniper. When Rachel Corrie is bulldozed by an Israeli man who's about to bulldoze a Palestinian doctor's house. I mean, I think people don't realize we're dealing with 50 years of humiliation.
Yeah. You want to come back on this?
Well, first of all, talking about bulldozing homes and little children, they don't bulldoze normal homes of innocent people. It's the homes of suicide bombers.
No.
People who have tunnels under their house.
That's called collective guilt, and that is unacceptable in our system of law. You do not bulldoze. If somebody murders somebody here in Bradford, does the British authorities, do they arrest the whole family?
Israel's a democratic. Can I say Israel is a democratic state? At least they're letting in those two people to protect people. Do you think the other Middle Eastern Muslim countries would be allowing other people in to protect?
That's a straw man argument, a fallacy.
The reiteration of the wrongs, the terrible wrongs which have been committed on both sides, and which are continuing to be committed, does not necessarily advance us towards an ending of those activities. I think we have to accept that it is almost impossible for a democratically elected leader of Israel to go as far as he needs to do in order to make peace with Palestine. And Sharon is actually taking risks in that sense in what he is doing. I think it is impossible to see a government in Palestine able to do what is required to reach a peace with Israel. I think what is necessary now is for a little bit less of the reiteration of the wrongs, and for the powerful states who can bring this war to an end to get in there and do it. And America is one, because America at the end of the day can force the hand of Israel. The Saudis and the Syrians can force the hand of the Palestinians. And I think the sooner the Syrians and the Saudis and the Americans get together to try and dictate peace terms on their client states, the sooner we will get a peace. I do not see any other way of doing it.
Okay. There are 10 of you with your hands up, but we're halfway through the program, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to move on to another question. Before I do that, Question Time moves to Birmingham next week, and on the 13th of May, we're in St Andrews in Fife. If you'd like to be in either of those audiences, call us on 09011 114 411, or go to the BBC's website, the BBC/Question Time, and you can also there debate some of the issues that we're discussing tonight. But our next question, if I could have it, comes from Alex Casale.
If an Eastern European immigrant gets on his bike and comes here to look for work, should he be given a job?
It's a reference to something you said, isn't it? Well, all right. I don't think you should start, because you've just finished.
I can go on and on.
No, I know you can. That's what worries me.
I'd like to start by just...
Rhona Cameron, you do it.
I'd like to start by just reminding Norman that was a really bad call to say that all these years ago that everybody goes on about.
But I never said it.
You did so.
Rhona Cameron.
If an Eastern European person comes here, should they be given work? That's the question, yeah? Just to recap.
Yeah, we've got a huge expansion coming on Saturday.
Yes.
And it's going to be 25 countries in the EU, and
yes, I think if you
70
come to this
million people
country,
joining.
you should be allowed to work and given work, and that's all part of fulfilling, you know, normal sort of citizen roles. And yes, that's all very good and healthy. I don't understand what the problem is there at all.
Is there a problem of any kind with the enlargement of the EU for you?
More EU, I love it, the whole thing. It's great, and it's also good because it's also really good because it's much more against America, you know, which against the Bush administration certainly. But do you know what I mean? The strengthening ties with Europe is not really what they want. I will speak quite basically because, as I say, I'm not like a political expert, but I do feel passionately that things to do with Europe are good, and I welcome all these new moves. You know, I think things have moved on. I don't care about the old British imperialist attitude. I'm very happy to be a part of it, and I think it's great if people can come here and work, and we can go there and work and freeze things up, and it's all a positive move forward.
Were you surprised?
That was a bit simple, I know, but it's genuinely how I feel.
Were you surprised that the Prime Minister appeared 4 days before to say that Britain had reached crunch point and he was going to have a top-to-bottom analysis of immigration?
I won't be surprised at anything Tony Blair does next, because he is clutching at straws, frankly.
Jack straws.
Yes, indeed.
And he'd like to clutch at his after what he did to him on the referendum.
Very good.
Norman Tebbit.
No, not surprised at all.
I welcome the accession of the new 10 countries to the community. I don't see that we're going to have much of a problem with immigration from those countries. I've got in my flying logbooks from my Air Force career a lot of Czech and Polish names of Czechs and Poles who came here during the Second World War, and thank God they did, because without the Poles in particular, we would probably have lost the Battle of Britain. They were a vital part of it, that Polish contingent. So I welcome them. They will integrate into this country. They will fit in very well indeed. Will we get any bad eggs amongst them? Of course we will. Will we get any scroungers? Of course we will. We've got plenty of scroungers of our own. Will we get mostly good people? Yes, we will get mostly good people. And they will be mostly good British citizens who in 2 or 3 generations, apart from having names which are still slightly unpronounceable, will be as British as I am.
Okay. The gentleman in the second row there.
Yeah, I agree with Lord Tebbit totally. I think immigration and employment for Eastern Europeans is a great thing. But I'd just like to ask Baroness Amos, why is the government sending out unclear messages? Why can't we just get a clear message as to whether they will or won't be gaining employment?
Baroness Amos?
I think the messages have been confused, and I think that they've been confused for 2 different reasons. I think they've been confused because what we're doing on asylum and what we're doing on immigration, and particularly managed migration, has become very confused indeed.
It has.
Yes, it has. And I also don't believe that I would ever agree with most of what Norman Tebbit said on immigration, but I just did. This is an absolute first. But on your point about a clear message and will people be able to come in and work? Yes, they will. What they will not be able to do, if they haven't got a job, is to claim benefits. That's the issue. So that's the message on immigration. There's a separate message, of course, on asylum, where we've worked very hard to get the numbers down.
And that's
because of the confusion between people who are coming in as asylum seekers and people who are coming in as economic migrants from various countries, tearing up their documents and then pretending to be asylum seekers.
Well, I think Baroness Amos made a good point that they won't be able to collect any benefits, because I think they're going to be taking the jobs that the people on benefits don't really want.
They will get benefits though if they're in work, won't they?
They will get benefits if they're in work after a year.
You won't get any benefits for the first year? You won't be able to go to the NHS if you hurt yourself while you get your first job?
Yes, you can go to the NHS, but then your country of origin pays for you because of the reciprocal arrangements that there are
family tax credits, all sorts of credits
between European countries. That's why you can have access to health.
Thomas.
Of course you can.
I think it's time that we in the United Kingdom really walk up to where we want our future to be. This is a magnificent thing that's happening at the European level here. 25 countries coming together, 450 million people coming together in union to work together, to work for peace and for a sustainable future for Europe. We should be welcoming that. We should be welcoming the opportunity to have people here doing jobs that, yes, to be frank, lots of our people are no longer prepared to do. And we should welcome the opportunities that our companies will have to work in those countries and investing and building those economies. Some of these countries are already richer than Wales, I have to tell you. These are not poor countries, and we could do with some catching up ourselves, and we want to work with them in that regard. But let's be clear about this. Something like 7 or 8% of the UK workforce are migrants. In the United States, something like 15%. In Australia, it's something like 25%. We do need that pool of labour. It does support our economy, and we need to work on the European-wide level in order to make the European Union work. So we do have a lot of debates around the Constitution to have. We do have a lot of debates around the referendum to have. But we need to make a decision. Are we going to be ruled by Bush and Murdoch, or are we going to work with our European partners? And I know where I want to be.
Okay. The woman there. Just hear from 1 or 2 people. You, madam. And then you, sir, over here.
Okay, on the issue of EU enlargement, one of the countries that's going in on Saturday is Cyprus, and some of you may know there was actually a referendum on Saturday, and I'm a Turkish Cypriot, and I was extremely upset by the outcome, because what the outcome has actually meant is that the Greek Cypriots have voted us out of the European Union. We voted yes, the Greek Cypriots voted no for reunification. I mean, if it had happened, if they'd voted yes, we would have been the first Muslim community within the EU with official representation. Right. How does the panel feel about that?
Okay, well, I mean, it's a different question about Cypriot reunification. Do you say
can I just make a health warning on something that Simon Thomas said? He's greatly in favour of migration and freedom of movement and all the rest of it. But by the way, if you're English, be pretty careful about buying a property and living in some parts of Wales where Plaid Cymru are hounding the English and trying to keep the English out, not least by use of linguistic trickery to avoid them getting jobs.
I mean, that's a healthy thing to keep the English out.
That's absolute nonsense. I mean, are you honestly telling me that the 500,000 English people living now in Wales aren't enjoying themselves there? I mean, I think they are.
In South Wales they are, because the Plaid Cymru are not in charge.
Are you telling me that if you had a Slovakian coming over as a nurse, you wouldn't want them to speak English?
He's a separatist for Wales from England, but he wants to join England into the Europe.
No, I want Wales to join you.
Come away, Simon.
You made me lose my voice now. You made me so annoyed.
Well, that's a good thing, because we'll be able to hear from the man in the second row there.
I like everybody else, I fully support the enlargement of the EU, and I think people forget that it's a two-way street. And although the majority of the movement may be in our direction for obvious reasons, there's a huge number of people who will enjoy the benefits of being able to access the things that those countries have to offer. I just wonder, though, what the impact on the machinery of the EU will be. It seems to me that the EU is becoming more and more detailed, and more and more decisions are having to be made. And at what point does the enlargement of the EU become unwieldy? And will we see an impact on the day-to-day efficiency of the EU?
Well, I mean, the question you talk about, good for 25 people in a union, is, I mean, the Tory party today talked about a country called Europe and said they didn't want to belong to a country called Europe. Do you want to belong to a country called Europe? Do you think that's the way to go?
Well, I heard Michael Howard the other day saying that countries make treaties with each other. Don't belong to a state, and I think I'd quite like to stay at that level. I support the common market.
And unions have constitutions.
And golf clubs, as somebody said the other day.
And political parties, including Plaid Cymru's constitution, which is welcome to all English and anyone else who wants to come in.
I wouldn't like to see...
Hold on a second. Now, I don't really want to go into Cyprus for the moment, saving a grace, because I think it's a different issue. Norman Tebbit, do you think the enlargement, and you're very much against a constitution for Europe and all that, do you think the enlargement inevitably will lead towards that pressure, even if Britain resists it?
Well, what is clear is that we've got to have a new working arrangement within Europe to accommodate the new members. The present system was unwieldy anyway, and with another 10 new members and others in sight, it simply will get worse and worse and worse. And there are only two possibilities. You either go towards a country called Europe, in which the capital city is Brussels, and that's it. And that's where the Constitution would lead us. Or you say, hold on, chaps, let's sit back a moment and let's see whether there isn't a different construction of Europe in which more of us can do what we want to do and not obstruct others from doing what they want to do. If the French and the Germans want to get in bed with each other and have a single state, I don't want to stop them doing that. Why should I? But what I don't want is for them to insist that we have to join it as well. And the Constitution would do that. You can, if you have one Constitution, you're one country. Simple as that.
Norman, I simply do not agree with that.
Well, I know you don't, but you're wrong.
I'm really glad we finally found something that we can disagree on. Why? Because you have a constitutional treaty which says how 25 countries work together, and we're talking about how you make a union of 25 work more effectively. Does that suddenly become one country called Europe?
If you have a foreign minister.
Yes, we actually, in the United States...
Can I just finish off on this point? I mean, it's absolutely clear that foreign policy will rest with individual countries, but where we feel that as a group of 25, we can work more effectively on a particular issue, and peacekeeping is a good example. I was the Minister for Africa, and we made decisions at European level, which meant that we sent in a peacekeeping force into the Democratic Republic of the Congo that was absolutely needed. And we wouldn't have done that, and we wouldn't have been able to do that as the United Kingdom or France without coming together. I think that's a good thing.
Let's hear the American point.
Well, we have a precedent because in America it originally started out with the Articles of Confederation. And the main issue was whether or not states retain their sovereignty. And we ended up, the Civil War was what solved the problem. Prior to the
600,000 dead.
Exactly, and so this is a very important point in Europe's history, what they decide to do now, because it could end up, unfortunately, if we trust history, which we should, it could end up going down the road being the very issue that will lead to violence and
so your instinct would be, on the American experience,
that they better work it out now, what exactly they mean.
No, but that having one constitution is a bad thing.
Well, no, the
Constitution
Constitution was called the Great Compromise. And in 1861, the Civil War is what dealt with that compromise, which is where does state authority finally rest. And in the end, it was Abraham Lincoln that determined that it was in the federal constitution and not in the state constitutions.
And the important thing is that we have peace in the European Union.
The woman in green
Let's
and
not
white.
forget that.
It's the same issue.
Well, I'm male actually, but never mind.
Oh, you're male, sorry.
Well, I also
minor
welcome
aberration,
the enlargement of the EU, but what worries me is the difference in our immigration rules. We're allowing people to start working here instantly, whereas most of our partners in Europe are going to wait years and years and years. I thought the EU was about standardisation.
Baroness Amos, do you want briefly to answer that point?
There's freedom of movement across all European countries in the Union. That will apply to every single country. The differences are how different countries are applying their welfare rules. Okay. And we've made decisions on our welfare rules in the same way that other countries have.
We must move on. We must move on because time is running out on us. Nick Thompson, please. Nick Thompson.
Are identity cards a genuine weapon in combating terrorism, or simply a smokescreen for the government to bring the population under tighter central control?
Hamza Yusuf, do you favour compulsory ID cards?
Well,
you have in the States.
I would say we actually don't technically, but if you don't have one, you better watch out if you're walking around. So, I mean, I would say that, again, we're dealing with one of these very, very difficult slippery slopes, because what's happening with terrorism, it's being used by certain elements within the United States to basically diminish the civil liberties of the citizenry. And there's a lot of Americans that are deeply concerned. In fact, I know for a fact that Republicans are actually going to vote Democratic this year. I mean, there's Republicans that are very deeply concerned with the Patriot Act and these things. So I think that, you know, one of the things I love about coming to Great Britain is I tend to breathe a sigh of relief as I smell the fragrance of liberty. And I'm really worried about losing that pleasant atmosphere that you have in this country. I mean, last year I didn't have to show my ID to fly to Scotland. This year I did. And I think that that's a real tragedy. Although, on the other hand, you've got a really serious problem with people that are, you know, troublemakers. But ultimately, they can always forge these IDs.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's...
I think it is that troublemaker point is exactly right. I think that, I don't know, I mean, personally, it's one of these things you have to look at. Well, personally, it wouldn't bother me if I had to carry an identity card. I carry a driver's license, I need a passport, I need to give the names of my great-grandmothers if I want to pay my bill. And, you know, whatever. It wouldn't really bother me to carry another piece of plastic with my face on it and my details. However, symbolically, it certainly is a further move to have state power over civilian power. And I think that is rather patronising. On the other hand, I hate to sit on the fence on this, but on the other hand, you know, we are living in paranoid, dangerous times, and it perhaps is a way to you know, to sharpen up security. But yeah, but you know, it is state power over civilian, and that's kind of rich, isn't it? When they kind of mess with our lives every day, anyway. State and government
I'm not sure where you
in their wrong
stand on this
decisions.
issue.
Exactly, because I stand on the fence, and it's really annoying. I thought about this, and I thought we might be talking about this. I wouldn't mind carrying it in my wallet, David, but you know, symbolically, it's kind of wrong.
Okay, the man in the purple shirt.
Yes, as I understand it, I think the proposal is that these be made compulsory in 2013. Now, perhaps I'm pessimistic, but I think we might be subject to attack somewhat before then.
Yeah, we'll all be dead then by the imminent nuclear strike that's going to happen probably by the end of this decade due to the demise of the globe. You can laugh, but that's what's ahead of us.
The woman in the back there. Sorry. Can you get to the person at the very back?
Would Sheikh Hamza please explain a bit more about the Patriot Act, because I don't believe it has got enough publicity in this country, and I believe it should be something that should be questioned, the civil liberties. I personally wouldn't mind carrying an ID card, but I would like to know more about I wouldn't like the fight on terrorism to be blown out of proportion.
Well, we can't have a seminar on the Patriot Act, but maybe you can just briefly
I won't do that, but briefly, I mean, people now, the writ of habeas corpus, which is, I think, something we're all very proud of in the West, is lost. I mean, you have American citizens that have been basically arrested and have no recourse to legal representation. And I think that, you know, these things are a sign of the times, but I think there's something, a lot of people died in these lands to ensure that we would be free people. And I think that to forget the numbers of people that died, that we might be free people and not be controlled by government. And all of them were very wary of government, and I think that we should also maintain that vigilance.
Simon Thomas.
I think we're at a real crossroads here. We are used to a free, liberal, tolerant society. We are under threat. Partly by terrorism, partly due to the actions that we've taken ourselves. But, you know, that's the situation we find ourselves in now. So we need to think about how we actually deal with this. Now, I'm convinced that identity cards do not deal with terrorism. All those who carried out some recent atrocities had identity cards.
Spain.
It's intelligence in Spain, in 9/11 and so forth. It's intelligence that deals with terrorism. £3 billion minimum is going to be spent on this scheme. That's money I'd like to see spent on solving some of the problems that give rise to terrorism in the first place, and solving some of the intelligence difficulties we have in acknowledging and knowing where that terrorist threat is coming from. And the second thing, I think the second thing I have to say, David, just quickly, is that I think we can all feel fairly relaxed, perhaps like Rhona, about the idea that our passport come driver's license come everything else is there. The question is not the identity card itself. It's the database that the government keeps on us as individuals about all our information. That has not been answered. And I would say this, until we have a written constitution in this country that guarantees what our freedom is and our relationship with the state, then we should not give the state the power to have identity cards over our lives.
Okay. The man in the blue with a green stripe on, you, sir.
You're discussing identity cards in relation to terrorism, but we were just discussing about our fears of immigration. Surely identity cards would solve the problem of illegal immigrants to this country?
Norman Tebbit?
In what way?
I think anybody who is clearly and decisively of one view or the other on identity cards hasn't thought very much about it. I think it's very difficult not to be somewhat on the fence on this issue. First of all, let me say that I believe that my right to walk down the street is not dependent upon the state giving me that right or giving me a piece of paper which says I have that right. And I'm very reluctant indeed to let the state, by giving me a piece of paper, say they're giving me that right. It's mine. It always has been. And that is why we and the Americans come to the same conclusion, which is very different, I might say, to that which is held by most people on the continent of Europe. But on the other hand, I acknowledge that we're living in extremely difficult times. I don't like the expression war on terrorism because it's not a war in that sense. But during those times, we do have to concede some of our liberties in order to save our liberties. So I come down in the end saying, yes, I might agree.
That sounded like George Orwell.
Well, we did during the Second World War.
Yeah.
We had to intern people without trial during the Second World War. And we had to do all sorts of difficult things of that kind.
I mean,
but at the end of the day,
war,
if I may just finish with this sentence, what makes me most uneasy about identity cards is not that they would be abused by this government. I don't believe they would be. But I am not sure that they wouldn't be abused at some time further down the road by another government, and particularly by that government in Brussels, which is essentially corporatist, authoritarian, centralist, and somewhat fascist.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that I don't think that identity cards in any way would solve all the problems that people think will be solved by us having ID cards. And I certainly think just a narrow relationship between ID cards and terrorism, that somehow ID cards is going to solve a problem of terrorism, I don't think that that washes at all. I think the issue...
That's what you said initially.
Not at all. It's not. It wasn't.
What David Blunkett said initially was it was a part of the fight against terrorism.
Part of the fight against terrorism.
Part of the fight against terrorism would be
but there
Iraq.
are a whole number of other things that
Not
need to be
being a
looked
stupid
at.
illegal war in the first place.
And also the fact that biometrics are being introduced all over the world, and we're going to have biometric data on our passports. We're eventually going to have it on our driving licenses. So to pretend that we're not going to go down that road, I think, would be nonsensical. The other thing I want to say is that there is a real issue about how they're used. And there is an issue about whether or not we move to compulsion. Now, the decision on that will not be taken for another 10 years, and when it is taken, it will be taken by Parliament. It will be put to Parliament, there will have to be a vote, and it would have to be agreed in the context that existed at that time.
Okay, Nick Thompson asked a question. What do you think?
I personally am very worried. I agree totally with Lord Tebbit. I think that my one worry is the future government. But I also worry that the present government, which hasn't really given us the real reason for going to war in Iraq, or with the Hutton inquiry has shown us that they can perhaps play with information, not tell us the entire truth, might actually use the information to perhaps, maybe not sinister, but...
we'll all be rounded up. Everybody like me who was arrested for my involvement with the anti-nuclear movement in the early 80s will all be rounded up when things get out of control.
You think it'll be on your record?
Why is my HIV status relevant?
Why is what?
My HIV status relevant. That's apparently what's going to be put on. Why are they going to be in shops? Identity card readers.
I don't think... Is your HIV status...
Apparently on the... Well, according to your BBC News report.
Don't trust them.
The decisions about the data have not been taken yet.
But isn't this the danger? We've taken a decision on principle without knowing about the data.
All right, let's hear from the three people. There's three people up there. Hold on a second. There are three people all with their hands up. Let's just go along. 1, 2, 3. Briefly, if you would. The woman first of all on the right.
I hardly think that an ID card is going to prevent terrorism, but I do think that this country has been a soft touch for illegal immigrants for far too long, and I welcome any move that's going to prevent this for the future.
Okay, and the man next to you.
I think it's phenomenal what's being justified in the name of the war on terror. We already have a number of people detained in Belmarsh without charge, and amazingly, without even being questioned for months on end. I think the ID card will just be used as a tool to deny basic human rights, and I really fear that we're going to end up living in a police state.
Okay. And you.
If the public's got nothing to hide, then why should they be so afraid of simply carrying something with their identity on?
Okay. I think the three of you ought to have an argument together.
For the reasons we've just discussed.
The gentleman in blue here, just down here on the corner.
I just think it's an excellent idea, because then in Wales, when the English come over, we can see that they're English by their identity cards. And we can come up from the coal mines wearing daffodils and leeks and leave the sheep alone, play rugby, and all the other cliches you want to bring up, Lord Tebbit. And what you said was absolutely disgraceful. It's not far off what the BNP get away with saying.
Oh, Beauregard. Okay, last brief word from you.
On the ID cards, I feel like it's been really interesting discussing this, and I feel I'm much more...
Are you off the fence now?
I am off the fence. I'm against ID cards.
Excellent.
I've just suddenly remembered my history in the early 80s of being arrested for anti-nuclear activities, and I think that there will be a police state, and it's heading to that.
All right.
Why rubbish? You never know. Never know. These are desperate times,
This is scaremongering at its worst.
Why is it codswallop?
We have 10 years to find out.
You're not going to buy all this rubbish about it. I mean, it can
we
very
have to stop.
quickly.
We've
It's
run
a
out of
smoke
time.
screen.
Not even very quickly. Apologies to those of you who didn't get in. Our time's up. You can carry on the debate on the website.
It was her fault.
My thanks to the panel here, to all of you who came here to London to take part in the programme. We're going to be in Birmingham next week. The Labour Minister Yvette Cooper, Nicholas Soames, the Shadow Defence Secretary, Lord Steele, the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Bishop John Sentiment,